Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest. His name is Daniel Kristos. His last name is spelled Kristos, and he is with Baal Buster. So you can see his podcast or his transmission. Baal as Baal, right? Like Baal, Baal Barith is when we were talking about the pre-show. That's Damien Eccles' name, or some of these other Old Testament gods. But he just published a book. Title of it is Priestcraft Beyond Babylon. So I was reading through it today. A lot of really cool information. Some of the stuff that I've looked over, but other unique kind of material. So we're going to talk about that book and also his kind of podcast. So Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, William. Appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah, great. I'm glad that you reached out to me. People who may not have heard your name or your show, maybe you could do a little background information and what led you up to publishing this interesting book, Priestcraft Beyond Babylon.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Well, I think I started the podcast under the radio. I had a radio show on Revolution Radio for about 34 episodes. And I also, prior to that, had a show called Mission Intuition that I had on YouTube. And then I think around 2019, I changed the name to Ball Busters. I kind of found a little logo. I took the Molochian looking dude, and I just put the circle with the line across it over the top of it, kind of like a throwback to Ghostbusters, but with ball being the problem there. At first, it was basically, I was reading a lot of stuff that when I was on the elliptical, I was just reading books. So I picked up, Eustace Mullins' Murder by Injection, had Age of Reason by Thomas Paine, multiple books by Michael S. King, and also, did I already say Behold the Pale Horse?
No, you did not, but you do mention Cooper often in your book. You actually kind of dedicate your book to a number of people, including Cooper.
Yeah, exactly. And those influences over time, there was just so many ideas that I didn't know about. And I was like a history kind of a major. If there wasn't really more of an English major, but I had really great grades in the in history in college. And that was what always interested me, because I had maybe more than one professor that spoke off script. So he would always, interject things that weren't being taught. And that interested me because I like a good mystery, that it excites me to try to find out something. Unfortunately, this stuff has real life ramifications if you don't know it. And that's where it gets a little dicey. So that's where I started putting out the videos explaining, in case other people hadn't heard this, because at 30 something years old, I hadn't. And I wanted to try to share that information because I thought it was vital, especially the stuff that you hear from Eustace Mullins and the history of vaccines never being anything that's really all that good for you.
Right. It's all snake oil, man. They've just made up so much of the science, and they have little axioms you're supposed to believe. Trust the science. Why are you an anti-vaxxer? All this other stuff. It's once you kind of key into their language, it's like these guys are just totally full of baloney. Read that a lot of those scientific papers they have are just total baloney. They're garbage. But yeah, so Eustace Mullins keyed into it. I think they've been poisoning people for 30 years or 40 years, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, and I have to wonder, Béchamp back in the late 1800s, he was able to make a microscope that on his own, they called it a looking device or something like that. It wasn't exactly called a microscope back then, I guess, or at least not his. And he was able to observe living tissue. And that's kind of the big difference between that and an electron microscope, where they poison it, blend it, throw a bunch of, radioactive chemicals in it, and then take basically what's a negative of what that thing is. And it's like trying to look at your hand and trying to figure out how it functions by sticking it in a blender and taking a little piece of it and sticking it under a microscope. Like, that's not the most efficient way to figure out how that thing would operate when it's, functional. So Béchamp kind of showed that there's pleomorphic microzymas. And when they say, germs cause disease, this whole germ theory thing, what he was saying is, no, the germs are eating the toxins. So they will, your cells will, basically spit out this thing, whatever is needed for the toxin at hand. So it will generate what's necessary for it to eat the toxins. Now, sometimes it can actually create another byproduct that's not as good or worse than what it's trying to eat. So that's where the problems sometimes arise. But I think you probably I would imagine that from what I listened to, you believe that the body is a intelligent thing, right? That there's a spiritual intelligence,
hyper complex and body mind connection. Yes.
Right. And that when you think of the allopathic viewpoint, it's what Dr. Peter Glidden says all the time. They view it as, there is no spirit, there is no God. There's, this is an atheistic practice, and the body's just a bag of chemicals waiting to break. And if it was intelligent and never would have gotten sick in the first place, and it's the job of the doctor to mitigate the symptoms, but there's no way of actually establishing a root cause or fixing the problem, right?
Right. I mean, that's the whole thing. The body corrects itself. You and me are talking right now. Something's commanding our breathing and our heart rate and everything like that. So it's kind of silly to think that it doesn't. There's not, like, whether it's your hippocampus or something that is autonomically operating the human body. It's off the charts. And that view actually pervades a lot of psychiatry and psychology too, because if you're just a bag of synapses and things like that, you can just shove stuff in there to make you happy, and it's kind of like a panacea for your life. Like they put you on drugs for the rest of your life. I know people on pharmaceutical drugs have been on there for decades, man. It's incredible. Wow.
Yeah, that's sad too. When you think of the older people and they're on maybe 5 different medications and then 5 more to counteract what the other 5 do.
Yes.
So it's pretty sad. And
if you look through all those medications and see their efficacy, and you'll be shocked. Like they promote statins all the time, and their efficacy is like less than 1%. So according to a test, like a placebo case and the statins, there's almost no differential. And then it takes out the effect of, like, why don't you go for a walk? Why don't you eat like fruits and vegetables instead, which have dramatic effects on your cholesterol and health. So yeah, there's a lot of fraud in this whole thing.
And what's sad about it is people, I think, are kind of blind to, the common sense causation, I would imagine, because when you understand that there's nutrients that are depleted in the soil, and that that if you discover that pesticides actually work in a way to where they block nutrients from being absorbed into the plant, then you're not getting it from your fruits and vegetables either. Like, you have to seek these things out in this time, in this present day world. You have to pretty much supplement, and if you're going to get the essentials and keep yourself healthy, because if you feed your body what it actually needs, it can usually be strong enough to fight off most things. And again, when it goes to the whole idea of a virus, like, I think that's a complete scam. Sorry, I probably shouldn't have said that.
I don't mind. I mean, I think that there are viruses. I don't know their efficacy or how, like, I think they've been seen in an electron microscope.
But that could be it could be an exosome, it could be a piece of something else, So it's, to me, it bothers me that more sensible, logical things are not seen first. Like, is it the invisible boogeyman unicorn virus, or is it the fact that they poison your food, water, air, and you're taking you're lining up for an injection of a flu shot or whatever other shot? Which one do you think it is? The one that you put underneath your skin and shot right into your body, or some exterior force of contagion?
They've been gaslighting the population for 30 years, at least for half a century. It's a total joke. And just the fact that they're putting anything associated with mercury in your shots is enough. They're lying. It's the most. You might as well put plutonium in your body.
And it's alchemical.
Just known. Yeah, they know mercury's terrible for you, so they're doing it intentionally.
And what are the components here? We have alchemical metals, right? You have mercury, you have lead, you have aluminum, which I guess that wouldn't technically be from alchemy, because that's kind of man-made, right? But we can go into
that alchemical feel. You're right. Yeah, you're right.
Just another way for Alcoa to get rid of its waste products, right?
Right. Just shove it right into your skin. Yeah. So a lot of those guys were, before whatever conspiracy culture, alternate media, these guys were putting out credit. You think that Eustace Mullins book is a credible? I haven't read it. It's a credible analysis of all these shots and stuff like that.
Absolutely. So it was published in 1988. So obviously there's a stopping point to where it goes, but it's a really good history of the AMA. And I think what I try to do is I try to show people the history of these establishments that people have been trained since birth to just trust blindly. So if you know where they came from and you know what they're capable of in the past, maybe you'll think twice about trusting them now. And it's more like trying to warn people, it's actually kind of I'm trying to reach people's hearts a little bit, and just, hey, this is what these people have been doing. What do you think has changed since then to now? They've just gotten more technologically advanced in how they administer these things and how they cover up their failures and their lies,
Yeah, I think they're intentionally just poisoning humanity. They're anti-human.
Yeah.
Anti-human death cultists. And I mean, the CDC is totally corrupt, and so is the WHO. These are horrible. They're worse than some actual like foreign armies, because they've actually become they've morphed or like camouflaged themselves into people thinking, oh, world health, they really want my health. No, they want the opposite, baby. They want a sustainable living. They want to kill off 4 billion people, man. That's really their goal. They have very ambitious goals.
Yeah, they've conditioned people to open the door for that type of invasion, and they've let their guard down to the point to they seek their advice for these types of how do we remedy this? How do we remedy that? Well, just ask the CDC. I don't know how many people still do that,
I don't know.
but it must be a lot, just not people I know personally, because I think a lot has changed in the last 3 years, but who knows, right?
People love the truth, so they really are trying to find somebody to tell them the truth about what's going on. And once they realize they've been lied to, then it's like even more a matter of survival. So I think that a lot of the stuff in the past, like me, for example, take me, I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure these shots are causing autism and they shouldn't put this stuff in there. And, I didn't get my children they didn't take, I don't call it vaccine. It's a misnomer. I didn't give my kids shots when they were kids. They don't have autism, thank God.
Right.
And now I'm like, there's no question they're intentionally poisoning people. There's no doubt they're putting poisons in the system, and they're trying to depopulate the whole world. Like I used to be like, that was kind of like a figment of my imagination. Like I got this eerie feeling they're really out to kill us. And now I'm like, they're definitely trying to kill us. There's no question. No, absolutely no question, especially after COVID.
And if you look back into the history of, ancient civilizations, ancient cults, the priestcraft were in charge of, or it was their domain to be the medicine men and the scientists, basically, right? Because magic and science, the whole Arthur C. Clarke type of, adage of anything of technological advancement will appear to be magic.
That's his third dictum, right? His third dictum.
Yeah, so their knowledge and the lack of knowledge of others keeps them in a superior class. So people will reach out to them and listen to their lead. And it's pretty much about control and power all the time. And I think that is not something that goes on very long without being completely corrupted by those same people that were already willing to deceive you in the first place.
Right. It's a status thing, right? It's maintained. That's a status. You keep the people in fear and eating out of your hand. And then the elite runs the priests and the shamans, right? So it's
and they're
kind
the
of
advisors, right? So
right.
they're in the ear of the king if the king himself isn't a priest king, right? Throughout history. So and even now, like who is surrounding presidents and prime ministers? They have their advisors, and where do they come from, and what are they about? And are they just operating those people's mouths, or what are they doing?
Well said. And I think you keyed into that. It goes all the way back through history, through all known civilizations, and you go all the way back to Babylon, right? Or you go into Mesopotamia. So
Sumer a little bit. I got some information more about their practices and their worship practices, because it's so funny when you look at this. It's like I learned, about the Ugaritic text and the pantheon of gods, which is like 236 of them, but the more main ones in Canaanite time, Phoenician too, and then you look at some of the Sumer gods that kind of translate and cross over. Their fables, their stories, the Baal cycle, nothing really tells you that they're awful beings, but it's more like the priestcraft guiding the people on how to worship them is what became evil. Not even so much the stories about them. So it's like Baal's a bad guy. Well, is he though? Is Marduk bad? Or is it the people that decided to, crop up around that and guide the way that worship was going to be practiced? So it's weird because you would think that there'd be some identifying marker of like, wow, Baal's a son of a bee, So
Right.
I can understand why they would do this, but no, it's more like the priesthood around it are the ones that actually caused
normalize the demon worship, right? These gods are all kind of demonic in their sensibilities, right?
I mean, there is like, and that was apparently Baal was the son of Dagon, not El. So there's some miscommunication, misunderstanding through, depending on what source you're looking at, because they'll say they are all, from El, and then others will say it's from Dagon. So that makes a Nat either his crazy girlfriend or his sister or both. And that happened a lot in the past, but I think he was separate from that. And she was willing to threaten her father and also kill a bunch of humans that were uprising against him and his rule after he defeated Yam or the sea in one of the stories. But if you think about it, if your job is to protect a king and there's an insurgents, building, I mean, maybe not taking too much pleasure in the slaughter of people, that's the questionable thing, but definitely snuffing out the threat is something that you would think you would do anyway. So it's hard to really judge too much on that. I mean, she was pretty bloodthirsty, but at the same time, it was a logical move if someone was coming at you, right? Head him off first.
But that's kind of where it all started. Like your title, Baal, right? The Baalim, there was these false gods. It's Baal means Lord, right? So Lord of the Flies is what Baal.
Yeah, Beelzebub would be.
Right?
Yeah.
So I mean, that goes all the way through the Old Testament. So you see all this stuff going back to the old Holy Land. But that was like a common theme in the Old Testament too. Was these people going after Baalim, which is synonymous with Molech too, right?
Yeah, and it's funny. It's because Baal, like you were saying. And I was listening to the phonetics from some Hebrew video people teaching how to pronounce. So I guess it's Baal because of the little hyphen. So that's why it's more like a play on words, because I'm from New York originally. So it's like, yeah, you're a ball buster, right? But he's pointing it out, it's like, J'accuse, like these are the people that are responsible. Right. But Baal can be generic, but it also, depending on the context and who they're referring to, it also is a specific person who sometimes is only known as Baal. And so it's confusing if you don't know which one they're talking about, because there's Hadad, there's Marduk, there's so many others and then Marduk has 50 names, and I think those end up in the grimoires that Crowley was very interested in. It's like the magical names of Marduk are part of the incantations or whatnot.
Interesting. I don't recall that offhand, but I'm sure he would be interested in a lot of this stuff, like his old ancient gods. I mean, he went through the whole Egyptian gods, which are like the ancient gods went from Babylon to Egypt to Greece to Rome, right? So all these pagan gods are all kind of. So now I think his table of correspondences, Crowley's, shows that they're all kind of like the likeness is different names, but the same kind of
like an archetype, concept. Right?
Yeah, an archetype. Yeah.
Yeah, so what's funny is there's also, and I think this might predate a lot of it. It all depends on how you interpret what you're being told through the history books. But there are Vedic god similarities to the Canaanite gods. So you would think that would predate what the Canaanites, civilization was, if we were to believe that this is like Cro-Magnon man or whatever, and Scythian type, the Vedic. I don't know, but I found that pretty interesting that they.
So Kali is supposed to be something like that, which would make sense, right?
Yeah.
Kali would be that kind of death god or whatever.
Right. She seems, and that's funny because a lot of people that you went to the Kali with the tongue, and a lot of interpretations, that tongue. Jack Nicholson does that in The Shining when he's at the bar. He does that. So
yeah, that's what the inspiration for the tongue and the lips was for the Rolling Stones.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, no, that's a known fact.
Oh my God.
And also, like, they like Kali, the far right, racist, neo-Nazis love this Kali and the Kali Yuga, right? They're trying to bring in this kind of end of the Kali Yuga is this Age of Chaos, kind of like an apocalypse, right? They're trying to bring that in. Yeah.
Right. And then who is I think that there's things that line up between that and like the Norse god mythos of
Loki or something.
Yeah, Loki's I think it's one of his children, right? Is the snake that's wrapped around the earth or existence that kind of like the Ouroboros is holding onto its tail, but it's actually devouring itself and destroying the world that's within it.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it's kind of like the Kali Yuga in a sense because it's total destruction. So everyone's in Valhalla now.
Right, and people, I think that the Kali Yuga influenced the Grateful Dead. So the Kali, it's like all throughout the common culture, and I think that it's even in Ed Sheeran's Bad Habits video, like he's doing the Kali kind of sign, smiling with his tongue out. So you'll see that people do this, like they'll make it in Hollywood too. They know what they're doing. Like you're like, why is he making that strange face? Well, he's doing an occult reference,
Yeah, and that's another thing that I kind of bring up. So I try to put a little bit of humor into, it's very stressful topics for people if they're just getting into it, and it could be a lot. Yeah, Ragnarok is another one, right? When they're doing this hand sign, so many people are like, that's Illuminati. I'm pretty sure it's a gesture for like, projecting your will or your intent onto others and you're doing a magical, you're doing a, what do you call it? Like a working or whatever.
right.
So.
And then that's all over the place. I think Hitler even was doing that. Yeah, there's actually a picture of him making that triangle sign. Let me see if I can find it.
He was Thule Society, right? And
oh yeah, he was initiated into a lot of stuff, but definitely Thule early. I mean, all those early NSDAP people were like Germanic occultism, like that, but also a lot of Blavatsky. And
yeah, he definitely had a book of hers on his, like, showing in some of his photographs, I believe.
Yeah, no, I think that's a given. He was reading all kinds of magical text. I did one in my book, Children of the Beast. He had a thing called, like, Crowley had Magic in Theory and Practice, and he was reading and lining notes on this book. I forgot who the author was, but the title was like Magic, Will, and Theory in Practice or something. It was almost like a play on Crowley's book, or Crowley played on this guy's book. But Hitler had that book. It was in his library, which a lot of it's disappeared. But it's at Brown. It's actually at Brown. And yeah,
There's
it's really something else.
Yeah. If there's anything that they've lied about and twisted around, it's World War II and World War I and the details around it. Like, from my perspective, the bad guys won both times. I mean, we're looking at the Bolsheviks. We were lined up with them, 40, 50 million people of their own, perhaps, between Ukraine and Russia, starved to death, shot to death, whatever you want to call it. Meanwhile, you have the Red Cross going into camps and administering shots there, and all of a sudden everybody gets quote unquote typhus. But that was the Rothschild Red Cross doing most of that mass die off. So I mean, it's like,
wow, that's crazy.
There's a lot going on. I think
I don't know. I don't know if this. Let me see if I can pull this picture up. I don't know if it's legit, but I've seen it in multiple places, and it looks real. But you can take a look, and I guess you can make the determination for yourself. I don't think this is shopped. Here's Hitler.
Huh. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Wouldn't surprise me if that's real.
Yeah,
maybe somebody in the chat knows. I don't know.
Yeah, in the book, I made a joke because the Sam's Club logo looks like the outline of the two hands going like this. So I go, it's obvious what these people are doing. They're very enthusiastic about their Sam's Club membership.
Right. But that black cube's everywhere. I think Freeman is. You mentioned Freeman at the intro of your book. That was kind of one of his claims to fame, was doing all those corporate logos or just totally chevrons and all this. It's all Masonic. So you're swimming in Masonic symbolism. That's kind of like the funny thing about the current age is all the public intellectuals, they don't want to talk about esotericism or the occult because it'll minimize them or make them look, off the thing. But we're just swimming in occultism. It's everywhere. It's in politics. It's in culture. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, the public initiation on the lowest level for sure.
Yeah.
Just the chimera representation in children's toys and, the unicorn and all this. There's some dark stuff going on, just, put out there for very young children to consume.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. Over and over. A lot of these shows, like have themes of sacrifice and occultism, and like I can't remember some of these shows' names, but they're exposing. They're like, I don't know what it's like. It's not an overt initiation. It's almost like somewhere between exposing the occult and initiating them, where they're showing them the symbol that they don't know the meaning of yet.
Yeah, and you know it's funny when I was listening to you in your podcast, there was an old Freeman episode that I couldn't place who he had on, and I'm pretty sure now after listening it was you. It was about the occult symbolism and the Crowley numbers and magic surrounding 9/11.
Right.
And that I don't think it could have been two people talking about that. And that was one of the more memorable episodes that I had recalled. That was pretty awesome, actually. So that was
there's a lot there. Well, you mentioned in your book, you go through the monolith, right? Or you call it the stone of foundation, right?
That's right.
Can you talk about that?
Okay, so the stone of foundation has multiple I guess like when you look at the Freemasons, they actually describe that they're deceiving people with this element, and that you don't actually learn its true meaning until a certain degree is reached, the Royal Arc degree, which I believe back in 2004 or something like that, they did away with it, that degree. But they were saying that, it's Jacob's pillow. It's the stone that the royal families have underneath their, what do
they call it? The something stone. It's the stone of revealing.
Yeah,
call it the stone of revealing.
Yeah, and this was Albert Mackey saying this in like one of the Freemasonic encyclopedias, but he also said it was the rock upon which Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac. Well, if you actually look at the stone of foundation, that thing's huge and it hasn't moved ever. It's a huge rock that's in the middle ground level, still embedded into the ground at the stone of foundation. So that can't be what that rock is that they're talking about, right? So, but the monolith for 2001: Space Odyssey, where you see it during the time of the apes, which obviously is another because evolution is totally true and legitimate, right?
Right. It's another dig at Christianity, right? Or even Bible-based stuff. Clark was a heavy-duty Mason. I don't know if you know that, but he was the highest
Kubrick?
level of it.
You said?
Clark. Well, Kubrick, their story behind 2001 is that Kubrick was smart. He would find intelligent people to help him write his whatever he was working on, right? So he tried to get somebody to help him. And for 2001, he got Clark, right? A very well-known sci-fi author, but also he came up with the idea of geosynchronous orbit, right? So like satellites. So he was kind of like a hybrid of science fiction and reality. So he was working with Kubrick to write the 2001: Space Odyssey. But one of the interesting stories is they were going to come out with, I think the movie was supposed to come out in 68 or 69. And they were going to do a side-by-side book and movie at the same time. But Kubrick kind of pulled a fast one on Clark and didn't give him permission to publish his book for another 2 or 3 years. So that I think the intent of Kubrick was everybody will just think that I was just making a movie, right? So he kind of pulled a kind of sharp practice is what I would call it. But anyway, Clark's book is very revelatory about the film because they were written concomitantly, right? And so you can see all that stuff and all of the Masonic numerology and kind of Crowleyan numerology. You want to take a guess at how tall the monolith is in Clark's version of 2001?
I would love to know.
11 feet tall, right? So it's the number of magic. Yeah. So they knew what they were doing. They were playing around with a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. So, it's funny that, so here's something that you just made me think of, is they're trying to utilize modern measurements in ancient sculptures and trying to make some kind of correlation there to where they'll say, okay, X distance from the sun, because we tell you, and that therefore you must believe us, or X distance from the moon is representative in the amount of stones at the Great Pyramid or whatever. So if that's true, where the heck how did they do that when there was no such thing as a mile back then?
Right.
You know what I mean? So how did they line that up? So something about that is not accurate when they're trying to pawn that off on you as something spooky. I mean, there's plenty of spooky things going on without having to fudge the numbers in order to make something work out for you. You know?
Right. You mentioned the Balaam in Baalbek or whatever. Isn't there some huge stone in Baalbek too that they can't explain how big and how it got there?
Oh, that giant pillar that they
Yeah, giant pillar.
there's no it never got laid or whatever. It was just laying on its side.
Yeah,
It, you see the people standing on it. You can be like, in order to get the whole thing in the shot, the person looks like a little speck on it.
yeah. It looks like a sideways skyscraper or something. It's incredibly huge.
Pretty
So there's a
crazy.
lot of mysteries. I mean, a lot of mysteries going back in the day. But
Which kind of
yes,
oh,
the
I was
stone
just
of foundation is just goes through our common culture. It goes back through masonry and kind of the ancient mysteries, right? It's kind of an ancient mystery thing.
yeah, and then I kind of bring up the Kaaba and the what's that one? The black stone.
Blackstone, right?
Yeah, and the Kaaba looks like a giant black cube as well, and apparently that predated Islam. They're saying that Abraham built it, but it's a monument basically to Saturn, right? Because they were Saturn worshippers prior to Islam, and the cube has always seemingly represented Saturn. And
Right. They just upgraded it and integrated it, right?
right, and that's fine if the intent, and I think intent means everything, especially in magic, to be honest. Um, if it evolved into that, and their intent was to pay homage to one thing, I don't think the actual structure or whatever it is that they're looking at has to change. It's just, if they'd evolved into a different understanding as to what this means to them, I don't see that that's being a big deal. But if the people on top who are shaping and changing the world still see it as a Saturn symbol, well, that's where you
Right.
have to concern yourself.
I mean, you see Blackstone, like this is one of the biggest financial
It's crazy.
entities in the world. Blackstone, you see it around. If you go to like I grew up in San Francisco, and they used to have the Bank of America building was the biggest building in San Francisco. It used to be a financial center before LA kind of grew after World War II. San Francisco was really the biggest city on the West Coast, and it was I think Gianelli was the founder or something, but they had a huge black stone right in front of it. Like I didn't know what they were doing back then. Now it's like very clear to me that they're integrating kind of Masonic ideas and stuff.
Yeah, and that's funny too because when you get into Sabbatean and Frankism and you talk about the Sabbath or Saturday and all that, apparently Sabbatai means Saturn.
Wow,
So
wow. And they kind of had that idea of like bringing about the most wickedness. It's almost kind of like this kind of Kali Yugas type stuff. Like you're supposed to bring in be as wicked as possible to bring in the Messiah, right? Or do
yeah,
horrible things.
yeah. Basically, apparently, if it's too hard to make everybody good, and that would be the coming of their, and let me just emphasize their Messiah. Uh, then the other alternative is to make it kind of like that movie. What was it called? The Devil's Advocate, right? With Al Pacino. He's like, I want to make it because he's like, Dad, why law? He's like, because I want it to stink so badly that he has to come down and take
Right.
notice. So it's kind of like the same logic there, and I think that's where you get you know, do you let God take care of certain things on His own timeline naturally? And does it mean the same? Does it have the same meaning if you force it? And really all you're doing is tricking the other people to believe that it's God's work? How is that? Which, apparently I would imagine that they'll also play once they condition the world and they're doing a pretty good job, they'll also
Yes.
play the role of the conquering God and take a bunch of people out and be completely justified because, hey, the revelation said so, and this is the playbook that we're following. So
Right. Right. So like when that other Messiah pops up, that'll be it. Like, hey, you guys are all blood drinking sex maniacs anyway, so you're gone, right? So it's a weird kind of rationale, like kind of
Jake,
purification through sin or something. I don't know.
yeah, Jacob Frank was quite the character, and there is, I don't know, I think it's pretty substantial evidence that he was the third man in the room. If you want to consider the scenario of like Adam Weishaupt, who was Jesuit trained, rabbinical father, and was it Meyer Amschel Rothschild at the time?
Wow. In Frankfurt, right? You wrote about that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and then Frank became overnight rich, and that whole, I mean, if you look at the Jesuits or if you look at Sabbatean Frankism, what they both say is, blend in, espionage, be converts into all these other things, and never show on the outside what you are internally. Otherwise, you can't be a Frankist. Same thing with the Jesuits. It's all about spycraft. So
Wow.
they can
I didn't know
infiltrate.
that. Infiltration.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. And I mean, I think a lot of scholars in Europe, I don't think it's kind of as much in the US because the Illuminati isn't from here, but they're beginning to acknowledge that the Illuminati, which is a real organization, was part of the Enlightenment. It was a secret society that had a lot of influential, wealthy adherents, and they infiltrated things. They infiltrated the French Revolution and things like that. I think even Washington acknowledged that in the States, like, nobody knows more than me that these guys are real, so.
Yeah, so George Washington Snyder and George Washington, the president, were having correspondence back and forth regarding that. George Washington had said that he hadn't been to a lodge more than thrice in 30 years or something like that. But I guess
Do you think he was being honest?
I don't know. Some say that he didn't even want a monument to his death when he passed, and obviously they didn't adhere to that if that was a real thing. But George Washington Snyder actually sent a copy of Proof of Conspiracy. It's a longer title than that, but Proofs of Conspiracy by John Robison, who was in England, France, and a bunch of other European countries, Germany, and had seen the transition. I'm not saying that the Freemasonic order was ever wonderful, but during the late 1700s, there was an infiltration in the lodge. That he recognized this doctrine that was different. These new types of degrees that came out of nowhere. The freaking French Masonic Lodge had 45 degrees. Wow. And a lot of them were just nonsense, hoity-toity, highfalutin language and ceremony. But he had also said that there was not just Protestants that were, hiding themselves from the Counter-Reformation War, but then when the Jesuits got dissolved or whatever, I don't want to call them expelled, but they were kind of put on timeout for a little while, right? There was Jesuits in the Freemasonic lodges too, and that's where your brain starts to crack. Like, how is it that there's Protestants and Jesuits in the same being taken care of under the same protective umbrella of the Freemasonic order? That requires a whole lot of research to figure out how it is that they didn't. I mean, how did
they're supposed to be at each other's throats, right? That's
right.
Mortal enemies. Mortal enemies.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And so going back to Frank, you see Frank as an influence on the New World Order and the present day Zionism, right? So you think
I think that Lutheran Kabbalah is what gave the go ahead for active involvement in such a plan to bring about redemption. And I think that's what they've been following, and the more recent name for it is Zionism. But I think
Zionism is part of Judaic redemption, huh? Do you think that's the case? Well, this whole Aliyah back to the Promised Land is part of their redemption as a people to propagate the occurrence of the Messiah, right?
I think the concept of feeling like you have to take an active role as a Jewish person in the bringing about of those conditions. I think that comes from Luria to Jacob Frank and Sabbatai, and then into the base ideas of Zionism. I can't tell you about the details because I don't follow that practice. So, but
sure,
for sure.
But I mean, it is interesting. I think that it was Theodor Herzl, right? Was the guy who kind of is the modern Zionist founder. But maybe, I mean, that's another line of research, is how much those two guys influence Herzl. I don't know.
Yeah, Herzl actually brings up Sabbatai, but he says,
really?
in a jestful way that he does. Sabbatai did his work to make himself great, and that he's a simple man who does it for the great of the world or something. He made that kind of So, but he did bring up Sabbatai. So
wow, yeah. Well, I guess I'm not surprised. The past is present, right? It's all coming around. Like these guys, I did a show on Not Yahoo mentioning Amalek. Like this is like a 2,500-year-old reference. So all
Right.
this stuff like you have in your book, like you go into detailed research about all these kind of old, gods going back all the day. But like it's come back around. I think there was a Baal arch that they put up in New York City. I got to find
Yeah.
a picture of that.
Yeah, they put it in. I think it was in DC as well. But I mean, that's the Ark of Baal. And what happened when Chimera and all that? Like what ISIS like destroyed a ton of that stuff back in I think 06 or something. They were bombing the hell out of that and destroying. Yeah, if they were actually organic, right? Organization of people who just happen to call themselves ISIS. I know that's an acronym, but still, it's kind of interesting. It's kind of strange that they destroy their own history in a sense, right?
Right, that's interesting. Yeah, they did a lot. They did a lot. Like they destroyed. Islam is really good at annihilating the culture they come into, and just replace it.
Apparently,
just get rid of everything.
Apparently, Allah told Muhammad to do just that. Tell them what your practice is, and if they don't want it, it's all right. Just kill them all.
Kill them all and destroy everything, right? It's just
Right.
just a total annihilation stuff.
Makes you wonder what God they were talking to at the time and who their Allah is.
I don't think it's the same God as the Old Testament, but I think it's just something like the gods that you talked about, a different type of God. But I mean, Muhammad very good at trying to integrate his view of gods into the Old Testament, but I'm not convinced. Who was Edmund Ronan? That was a name that I had not heard before.
Oh, okay.
I kind of knew Leo Taxel. You know the Leo Taxel story?
But I do not know that one. Maybe you can help me with that one. But we can actually thank Freeman for this one and why I started reading the book Mahabone, or also called The Master's Carpet. A lot of these things are PDF. They're so old. There's a free PDF online for it. Balenciaga, very very cool, John, with the hyphen. I like that. Well, also, so since he brought that up, let me just say this real quick. If you see a lot of 8s or Bs in any of the strange like occultic, when these ads or these news stories where they're using numbers and they're probably passing notes in front of you to their, to the adepts, but it's like 33,000 die or something like that, but they'll have the 33 in there or a multiple of 11. The 8s, and this is something that Nick and I have been talking about too, and he's been bringing this out to my attention. Nicodemus, if you look at a flattened 8 on both ends, that's an hourglass, right? And they've been using this hourglass symbolism too. And they actually had one at the back of somebody's podcast where it was like the flag of Israel, but it was an hourglass. The hourglass is a symbol of Kronos, which is Saturn, which is, if you want to call it Satan or whatever. So, and if it's a reset, how do you reset an hourglass? You flip everything upside down on its head, which seems to be the doctrine of inversion, which goes right back to Frankism again.
Right. Inversionism is also a principle of Satanism. It's just flat out. Like, invert everything that's in the Bible. That's the goal.
Yep.
Subversion, all that stuff. I mean, so Ronan is...
Okay. So he wrote a book. He was a very dedicated Freemason, and he had been writing out handbooks and, trying to discover all the lost details of the organization and compiling it for his lodge, and it was being dispersed around. And I don't know if he came across like old scrolls or if he found some other information, but he ended up becoming very disheartened by his discovery. And what he was saying is that this was a cloaked cult of Baal, and that he didn't like the idea that he was in service to Baal. So then he wrote the book Mahabone, or The Master's Carpet, where I think it's like not a real letter, but it's kind of like correspondence back and forth to his quote unquote son, where he's trying to talk him out of becoming a Freemason in the very beginning. That's how it starts off, and making all his points. So it's like setting up the idea to have an argument or a discussion, like a Socratic discussion, so he's pointing out where they've lied about their charitable contributions and, not even to their own brothers after the fires in Chicago or whatnot. So there's a bunch of different details that he brings up, but mostly it's the ancient mystery school, mystery Babylon connections from which he says the Freemasonic order is in service to and can't be separated from.
Right, and you can't get away from it either. Once you make those oaths and you're
Right.
initiated, it's like you're haunted by it. Like you're making death oaths, right? Like cut your throat and do all that stuff. So
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Let me see if I can find one of the. Oh, okay, so he says, is it all right if I read from this real quick? So this is a
Please,
quote
please.
from Maha Bowen, or the Master's Carpet, from Edmund Ronayne. It says, Freemasonry is far too serious a matter for any man to assume its villainous obligations without due reflection. For once you have crossed the threshold of the lodge room, divested of your own clothing, and wearing the habiliments of the order, and when once you become, as it were, bound by the cable tow of Satan to the altar of Baal, there is no place for after repentance. Though, like Esau of old, you may seek it carefully with tears. Living or dead, Freemasonry will never give you up. The law of Romanism is once a priest, always a priest. And so it is in Masonry. Once a Mason, always a Mason.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the secret underbelly of the United States. It's everywhere, and it's all not even talked about. Like you never see it on TV or anything. But like even in my town, it's pretty small. There's a Masonic lodge. There's a Masonic lodge in almost every town. But if you're not a Mason, it's just like a hidden thing. And I think Albert Pike said our lodges will be like beehives, where there will be dens of activity, but to the outside world, nobody will just see anything.
Have
And
you
I
ever
think
been to
that there's
Salt Lake City?
yeah, no, it's totally Masonic, isn't it?
Right around the Salt Palace, and in the sidewalks, I believe the beehive is actually a symbol of Freemasonry, is it not?
No
Because
doubt. There's no
they
doubt.
have it stamped into like the sidewalk, every so many blocks, and it's the beehive. Of course, obviously, there's honey there and all that stuff, but knowing that there's the Mormons, knowing that there's the Zion Bank right next to the Salt Palace, it's just a lot of symbolism all in one spot, right?
There's
And
no
it's
question Joseph Smith was going to Masonic lodges.
Yeah.
We know that. That's a known fact.
He forbade everybody else to go to one, but because he was better than everybody.
He had a friend who was talking about the Illuminati too. So he knew all the he was a lot like kind of Kubrick in a way we talked about earlier. He'd find new people to give him ideas and then he would integrate them. So there was one character who claimed to be like of some kind of tendril of the Illuminati, and then he's in and taking these symbols out of Freemasonry and signs and hand gestures and stuff. There's no question, and that's why I think the state symbol of Utah is the beehive. I think that's right. I mean, maybe I could be wrong, but I got to go back. But yeah, no, I have to do a show on just Joseph Smith and his Masonic connections. They are indisputable. There's no question.
Yeah, I don't think it was more of a. It was almost like did he feign like distrust or just abandonment of the Masonic order. I think it was like he pretended to distance himself from it, but it wasn't really. But I don't think there was any question, or even in his statements, that he hadn't at least once been one. Whether or not he did maintained position.
I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at my research and like other people's books, but people have written about it. But there's no question that upon his death, when they got him in the Carthage jail in Illinois, he said, "Is there nobody with sympathy for the widow's son?" So he let out the Masonic cry for help or something like that. So that was his last words, was something from Masonry.
Wow.
And so it's like that's a powerful element of it. But I think that in his public life, that wasn't ever divulged that I am a Mason. I don't think he could tell his religious followers because they wouldn't have trusted him. I think so. Like almost nothing. I'm not a Masonic scholar. I mean, I'm not a Mormon scholar, but I don't think anything in that religion has an overt, like we're Masons too type thing. But I think that there was some Masonic element in Joseph Smith. There's a really good book that just came out this year where they're like, this is the Masonic Lodge at this address that Joseph Smith used to go to. So they have the addresses in these Masonic lodges that he was going to. No
That's
question.
pretty specific. That's
Yeah.
great.
No,
Yeah.
we can do another show. Maybe I'll send you the book.
Nice.
But yeah, Joseph. I mean, he was kind of like a Crowley, like a magician. I don't think people see that element to him. They see him as maybe more prophetic. He called himself the prophet, like a more Christian prophet element. But no, he had the seal of Solomon or the seal of Jupiter on his body when he was dead. That's not a Christian seal. You ever seen Joseph Smith's seal of Jupiter?
No.
Oh yeah, well, I'll pull that up for you. It's amazing. He had that on his deathbed, and that's actually, he had a shoe stone, like a literal occult shoe stone that he would use to peer, and that's in the Salt Lake City Mormon Museum. Like, this isn't part of like the Christian tradition. This guy's a sorcerer, man.
Wow.
Come on, get a grip.
I've had Dr. Brian Artis on my show, I think 40 times. He used to be on every Monday. And a couple of the conversations we had was about his Mormon background. He apparently fourth generation Mormon, but he got out of that, and he had some stories to talk about with Mormonism itself. And then there was an additional video that I did with someone talking about the satanic ritual abuse that goes on in some of the.
There's like a lot of modern stuff. It's very strange. Like this guy Lever, I need to do a show on that too. So this is Joseph Smith's Jupiter talisman. It's like, what is the Jupiter talisman? Roman god Jupiter. This is what he had. Belonged to Joseph Smith. Probably silvery metal disc, Hebrew number on one side, and astrological symbols on the other. This isn't a Christian. This isn't a Christian symbol.
So it's kind of like a zodiac, right? With the astrological symbols, as a type of zodiac. So
the third-hand account has claimed that Joseph had the Jupiter talisman with him when he died, but legal declaration that Joseph had on doesn't mention anything like it.
Huh.
I've heard that was a stated fact.
Well, they were able to find that, but not the golden plates, huh?
Good point. Good points. Yeah. Well, one of the things that's kind of the giveaway from Mormonism is they have two origination stories for the Book of Mormon. Do you know that?
What's
so one is that he was. I've got to go back before I get in trouble. But my understanding is that there's one where he was dictated the book through a shoe stone. So John D. and I tell the story all the time. John D. and Kelly, right, were the sorcerer and the recorder or whatever. So one is like doing the work and the other's writing it down. Scryer and writer, something like that. That was the relationship between Smith and Rigdon. So supposedly Smith is getting this from the shoe stone and Sidney Rigdon's writing it down. And then there's another one where they translate it with the Urim and the Thummim, right? So which one is it? I'll have to go back and look at that. But it's kind of indicative that it's a little sus anyway. But nobody has that. Nobody's ever seen the plates.
With Hubbard and Parsons, you kind of had that relationship too. Yeah, with the scrying. Yeah.
No, but the Book of Mormon's brilliant, man. It's a great book. It's really interesting. Like they actually say that like there's multiple civilizations, and the Nephites came all the way from the Old Testament, like from Israel, in a boat, like an ark. What's that?
Like British Israelism, right?
Right. British Israelism. So then they came to the States, and then there was already another civilization where there was one remnant of the guy of this huge cataclysmic battle that ended up down to one man, and then he left the plates, and then another guy picked him up and started a new civilization. It's really great. It's a great book. Yeah.
Does any of that?
I'm not saying that it's true. I'm just saying it's a great book. What's that?
Does any of that line up with Blavatsky's like root race talk? Like a lot of her stuff, I think, is amazing, but then again, it gets into some other territory where I'm wondering how can you know this? This sounds pretty speculative, or I'm channeling it or something, you know?
I don't know. I know that she and they go all the way back to like Atlantis and Lemuria, right?
She had a lot of bad things to say about the Lurian Kabbalah, for sure. She was not a fan. Yeah.
No, I don't know. I don't know some of those details. I don't know that at all.
And I don't think Crowley liked her at all.
But he actually, Crowley integrated one. I think it's The Voice in the Silence. He liked that book so much he made it part of like, I think the AA to Astrum Argentum was part of his things. Yeah. So he integrated one of her things. But I mean, he was around in that all that latter 19th century mysticism. He was definitely very aware of all that stuff.
He was such a scoundrel too, like what he did with McGregor Mathers. Well, McGregor didn't copyright it, so he up and publishes it like it's his own, and then everybody thinks he's the genius. But the guy who was translating the grimoire for half his life was McGregor Samuel.
Right. He adopted and ripped off his styles, his magical style. They went to court, and there was like a recording of their court thing, and the judge was making some funny comment like, "These are two whack jobs having a copyright dispute."
Right.
But yeah, Crowley made it. Yeah, two Harry Potters. Crowley made an oath not to divulge that stuff, right? So he made some kind of secret oath, and then he went and divulged it like a jerk.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How about
but that's classic Crowley, though. He was constantly in fights with all of his former friends and stuff, like Yates. He was always having like disputes with people. Like he just couldn't keep out of like having problems.
When you were talking about I actually started reading your book, The Order Nine Angles, the Global Death Cult book, because I didn't even know. I had heard the Freeman video or discussion that you guys had, and then somebody said there's a book of it. I'm like, oh, so obviously I bought it, and that part where the first guy that you're talking about in the original, I'm gonna blank out.
David Myatt.
What is it with mountaineering in these guys? Like he was a mountaineer. You had Crowley like telling people bad advice, so they got caught up on something and died. And it's like
in Switzerland,
yeah.
I don't know. It's like there's some kind of adventurism. So the adventurism maybe in the real world attaches to their spiritual life. So they have this need for adventurism, and so
I love hiking and rock climbing, but I don't think I'm into their other stuff.
I'm not either. It is strange. Danielle, we could talk all day. I mean, the great book, a lot of great research, stuff that I never heard that guy's name before.
Ronan.
Ronan, yeah. So I'm glad that I came across that. There's other stuff. I would never have thought like this information would tie back into, the Rothschilds and Knights of Malta, Jacob Frank, Zevi, and all that stuff. I mean, you've covered a lot. I mean, it's 400 pages, so you've done your homework. There's no question about it. Is there anything you'd like to add or anything I missed before we wrap up?
No, I mean, you'll just talk about where you can get it, and I'm good. I really appreciate you having me on. This is a great talk.
Yeah, great to talk with you. Where can people find the book, Priestcraft Beyond Babylon?
Okay, so on Amazon, it's available on Kindle version. There's a 8x11, so like this size book, it's a big one. That's paperback and hardcover. Barnes & Noble has a 6x9. And you can get it electronically there. And then I just learned of this thing called Kobo, and apparently they have their own readers just like Kindles, so it's available there in an ebook. And then Lulu, which is funny because Lulu is like the food of the Anunnaki, like the people.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, like Lululemon, that thing that's a big scrying mirror that people work out in front of. That's another weird thing you could talk about someday.
Wow. Yeah, I don't think people don't know that there's an occult or like mystical background to that word. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think depending on how much of it the Sitchin stuff is, credible or not, I don't know.
Yeah, I think Sitchin, somebody really went through his stuff and said he had took a lot of liberties with the original source documents or something like that.
Well, Jordan Maxwell was a heavy funder of him, and he was straight up in adept. So what were they? What role were they?
Maxwell was a total Blavatsky type.
Yeah. I would have nothing against him except for what he said about Bill Cooper after his death, call him an alcoholic and all the kinds of nonsense. I have it in one of my videos. I do a lot of Bill Cooper. Like I'll take the Hour of the Time episodes and I'll find bits and pieces that are, that will translate into present day warnings, and I'll replay those episodes and with commentary. So there's probably like, I don't know, 28 to 30 videos that I've done of Bill Cooper. A couple of them are tributes, like I did one for his birthday, his 80th birthday. One for his November 5th, his murder date. I did that one just recently, obviously, about a month ago. And then like a couple of tributes, but most of them are like specific to this is happening now in our life. This is what he said 25 years ago. Right. What have we done? What the hell have we done since then? Have we fixed anything? No, we haven't. And we're blaming everybody else.
Right. And so you have like a tribute to him in here, and also his Mystery Babylon series. I think you had the initiation. Like he was doing amazing work. I would listen to that Mystery Babylon series like twice, all of it all the way through. I think it holds up. I remember the one on the UN was really good. Like he even had the meditation room down. Like almost nobody talks about that these days. Maybe a few, here and there. But
yeah, that part was included in the book too because of its tiebacks to the whole Stone and Foundation lore, because of the monolith. Basically, it's a stone in the middle of the meditation.
right, a black
right?
stone, right,
Yeah.
right. And you kind of if you get into Alice Bailey and the externalization of the hierarchy, you see the sinister. It's in my opinion, very sinister subtext under the words meditation in that context. And what I mean is they're trying to meditate to ascended masters and stuff like that, which I would call in my worldview demons. So,
right. Yeah. Channeling something that they're apparently, and with the Zohar, like most of the alien stuff that we're being told, even in as entertaining and awesome as it might be or have been to watch Ancient Aliens, it's like Kabbalist demons rebranded as aliens when you get right down to it. And there's a big mix and blend there. There's a Zohar channel on YouTube that plays all this stuff, and it's always integrating. When you catch the demonology part of it, and they start telling it as like an alien story, you start to realize like, oh yeah, now I get it. Good old Solomon and with his 72 demons or whatever the hell it was, building temples and stuff.
Wow. So I thought the Zohar was so supposedly Jewish mysticism. Is that right?
Well, that's what the Kabbalah. Yeah, Zohar Kabbalah is basically the same thing. But when you're looking at that stuff, it's the mysticism gets into the strange world, right? And it's not. That's when you start getting into entities and things of that nature. And I think they're trying to, I don't know, bring energy to or attention to certain archetypes or whatnot, to try to draw them closer. I don't know what the whole intent is there, but I think it's kind of dangerous stuff to be messing with if you don't realize that certain things, when you read it, it's reading you too, and it's integrating with you. It's calling up your DNA.
Dude, Peter Levenda is heavily involved in the whole To the Stars Academy. He's like a hardcore occultist. I have all these wars with that guy, man. Holy smokes. And he's been in the game for a long time. He knows a lot of these OTO rituals, all that stuff. So to see him in this whole UFO kind of environment is super suspicious. Like, I think they're initiating. I mean, it's kind of like I spoke earlier, it's somewhere between exposing and initiating. There's some kind of like Twilight world where they're acclimating people to these concepts, and hopefully they can probably find some true, demon worshipers through the UFO cultists is my guess.
Yeah, I think
they spell it. Yeah.
Go ahead. No, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say the title of Secret Machines is spelled with a K, right? The 11th letter of the alphabet. So they're giving something away there. Yeah.
Right, just how magic is spelled with Crowley to quote unquote differentiate it from stage magic, right? That's got to be the reason.
Yeah, man, it's great to talk with you. Let's do another show soon. Maybe we should go into Joseph Smith or something like that. I don't know, but
all right, cool. Give me a homework assignment.
Yeah, I mean, homework assignment for me as well. This is Alex. This is great. Looking forward to checking out some of William's other stuff. Yeah, anytime. You can find my stuff on my podcast. This will be out on my podcast YouTube channel. Pop back up. Rockfin, Patreon. I'm posting stuff on my Patreon for people out there. And you have a Rumble channel? I think I have your end of the book.
Rumble channel for Ballbusters, and I got kicked off of YouTube twice. So I have a little bit of a presence on BitChute, but I haven't put anything up there in a while. But so mostly about the Rumble, and then the podcast version of it that has a link to the video. And JoshuTV.com is the other one. And that place you never get messed with. You never get anything. It's one guy. His name is Josh. Go figure. And it's not a corporation. It's not a company. It's not a
board. Make it simple, right? Make it simple.
Section 230. It's beautiful. Great video player. Good stuff.
And you can be found on Twitter. Where's the best place if people want to follow up with you, ask questions or anything?
I would go to the Telegram group because that's where it's a lot easier. So it's t.me and then /BAAL Busters Studios.
Excellent. I'll put all those.
I like to pretend that I'm bigger than I am and call it studios rather than desk at my house.
And this is only volume 1. I mean, you finish off the book saying they're going to have volume 2, so people can look forward to that as well. Yeah. And all these links in the show notes. But again, the title of the book we discussed today, excellent book, a lot of great research, is Priestcraft Beyond Babylon, Baal Busters, Book 1, and the author is Daniel Kristos. Thanks so much for your time, Daniel.
Thank you, bud.
All right. Let's do that. I think that's 1 hour, 4 minutes. Yeah, I think that's good. Let's see if this stops, though. It's not stopping on me. Come on, StreamYard. End the program. I don't know what's going on. Stop. Do I have to get out of this thing?
Oh, yeah, it's still counting. Are we still on?
Are you still? We're still live.
Oh, we are.
Yeah, it's still on.
Hey,
It
everybody.
says trouble acting with my connection.
This is the bonus material.
I'll-
There it goes. Now you're frozen too. Oh, no.
Okay, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I still see the counter, and you froze for